Hey guys, tonight we're going to slow things down and sit with a story that matters. Leonard Brooks is a man most people pass by without noticing. 74 years old, retired military mechanic, Vietnam vet, lives alone in a modest Sacramento apartment. He doesn't ask for much, just tries to stretch his monthly budget with quiet pride and the help of a small check his daughter sends. But today something breaks, not with anger or violence, but in the way silence cuts deeper than words. Before we begin, please like the video and subscribe, but only if stories like this truly move you. Comment your city and the time you're watching. Now close your eyes, or don't, it's your choice. Either way, you're about to witness something real. It's late morning on a weekday when Leonard walks the 4 blocks to the downtown branch of Pacific Western Bank. The sidewalk is bright with California light, but his steps are slow. His knee aches from the same injury that sent him home from the jungle with more scars than medals. One hand grips a check for 80, the other steadies a cane that's as scratched and steady as he is. When he pushes open the glass doors, a cold blast of AC hits him like a wall. Everything inside gleams: polished tiles, chrome fixtures, an air that says efficiency, not comfort. He picks the shortest line and waits. Most of the customers around him are staring at their phones or shuffling papers. No one really looks up. That's all right, he's used to being overlooked. He's wearing his old 1st Cavalry cap, the patch faded, the brim curled from age. It's not a statement. It's just part of him. When it's finally his turn, Leonard steps up to the counter with a slight smile. "Morning," he says, voice soft but kind. The teller, a young woman with sharp nails and a tighter expression, barely glances at him. "Hi, what can I help you with?" "Just need to cash this check," he says, unfolding the envelope and sliding it across. "My daughter sends it once a month. ID?" she asks briskly. "Of course," Leonard nods, reaching into his back pocket. He pulls out a battered leather wallet and carefully slides out an old California driver's license, cracked at the corner, faded along the edges. "It's expired, I know. I don't drive anymore. But I've got my VA card too, and I've been a customer here for more than 30 years. The teller frowns. She taps a few keys, sighs, and walks over to a man in a tailored gray suit leaning against the back counter. Leonard watches her show the ID and point toward him. The man barely glances up before shaking his head. When the teller returns, she's already annoyed. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't accept this. You need a current government-issued ID." Leonard stands still, gently pressing his cane into the floor. "Miss, I understand the rule, but this is me. Same name, same bank. I've got the VA card, my account info. I'm not asking for a loan, just to cash a check to buy groceries." "It's not up to me," she says quickly. "I asked the branch manager. He said no." Leonard glances toward the suited man who now looks anywhere but back at him. The manager folds his arms and checks his watch like he's waiting on something more important. Behind Leonard, someone sighs. A woman mutters softly, seriously, but no one says it loud enough to change anything. "I see," Leonard says at last, nodding once. His voice doesn't rise. He doesn't argue. He steps to the side of the counter, leans slightly on his cane. He's not angry, he's tired. Tired in a way that doesn't come from the body, but from years of this exact moment. Being brushed off, dismissed, treated like a burden. His check is still in his hand, folded neatly. He looks at the floor for a long moment, then turns slowly toward the door, and no one stops him. Not the teller now chatting with the next customer. Not the manager already walking back to his office. Not the people in line who clearly saw everything. Their silence becomes a second verdict. A room full of bystanders declaring with their stillness, "He's not our problem." Leonard reaches for the glass door, his reflection faint against its clean surface. His shoulders slope slowly. That weight, the invisible kind, presses down again. But not everything stays buried forever. The door is halfway open when a familiar voice calls out clear and grounded. "Like boots on dry earth, Leonard Brooks." Leonard freezes, not because he's startled, but because there's something about that tone. It's not the voice of a stranger. He turns slowly, eyebrows lifting beneath the brim of his cap. A man in his late 60s is walking toward him, upright, commanding, without being loud. Pressed jacket silver at his temples, but still carrying that quiet steel that never leaves a soldier's spine. "Major Grady," Leonard says, surprised, a breath catching somewhere between disbelief and memory. Thomas Grady smiles and steps forward. You saved my convoy near Da Nang. Remember our transport stalled, and you climbed under the truck in the middle of a firefight to get her running again. Leonard's expression softens with a distant kind of recognition, the kind only men who've survived something together understand. Didn't think you made it back, Leonard says quietly. Barely, Grady replies. But thanks to you, I did. Around them, the bank has gone still. Customers who had been pretending not to notice suddenly shift. Eyes glance up, phones lower. The teller stiffens behind the counter, recognizing that this isn't a casual reunion, it's something else. The manager has stopped at his doorway, hesitant. Grady looks around, then down at the folded check in Leonard's hand. What's going on here, he asks. Leonard exhales. They won't cash it. Said my ID's too old. Grady turns his gaze toward the teller. He offered a VA card, yes. She nods slowly. But it's expired, the other one I mean. And his account, Grady asked, voice steady. He's in the system. But our policy, don't, Grady says, raising one finger without anger, but with authority. Don't recite the rule to me. Explain the decision you made. The teller glances at her manager, who is now slowly approaching. Grady continues, his tone measured but growing firmer. You had a man stand here, polite, quiet, prepared, and you turned him away without even meeting his eye. Sir, the manager begins, trying to reassert control. I'm sure you understand that we're bound by federal compliance. No, Grady interrupts. What I understand is that protocol without discretion is cowardice dressed in paperwork. The lobby is frozen. No one speaks. Even the people in line, who just moments ago stayed silent, now seem caught in something they didn't expect, the weight of their own inaction. Grady steps closer to the manager, not threatening but undeniably present. This man isn't just a name on a check. He's the reason my unit made it back from that valley alive. You think a laminated card matters more than that? The manager shifts, uncomfortable. I didn't know who he was, and you shouldn't have needed to. Grady replies sharply. He shouldn't have to be famous to be respected. Leonard, still near the doorway, hasn't moved. He watches with a mix of confusion and humility. It's been years since someone stood up for him unasked. His life now is quiet, intentional. Most days are spent on his small balcony, feeding birds, listening to old jazz on a crackling radio. But this is unexpected. The teller speaks up, her voice much smaller now. I didn't mean to... Grady cuts her off gently. You didn't mean to make him feel invisible. But you did. Leonard speaks finally, his voice soft and self-effacing. It's all right, Major. I wasn't looking for a fight. I know, Grady replies. But that's exactly why I had to say something. Because you didn't. Behind them, a woman steps out of the line, her expression uneasy. She clears her throat and speaks just above a whisper. I saw what happened. I should have said something too. Grady nods. There's still time. The manager hesitates, looking at the teller. Cash the check, he says quietly. She doesn't question it this time. She reaches for the check and starts processing it with trembling fingers. Leonard walks forward slowly, his cane tapping against the floor like punctuation in a sentence no one expected to hear. As the bills are counted and handed over, Grady says nothing more. He simply steps back, letting Leonard take the lead. But the room feels different now, thicker with awareness. Like someone had turned on a light, and suddenly everyone could see the dust in the air. Leonard doesn't smile, but there's a slight change in his eyes. Not triumph, not pride, just recognition of a moment long overdue. Thank you, he says to the teller as she passes him the cash. She nods without a word, her face drawn with the quiet weight of what just happened. Grady waits until Leonard turns and walks beside him toward the door. You didn't have to do that, Leonard says under his breath. You already did the hard part, Grady answers. I just reminded them to look. Outside, the sun is still shining, but something else is different now. The weight Leonard carried into that bank, the one not even his cane could ease, feels a little lighter. But not everything stays buried forever. The breeze outside feels softer as Leonard steps onto the sidewalk, but he doesn't say much. Grady walks beside him, not trying to fill the silence. They've both learned that sometimes what isn't said carries more weight. They make it to the corner and Grady checks his watch. I've got a meeting across town, he says. City's working on a housing bill for veterans. It's slow going. Leonard nods. Government work usually is. Grady hesitates. Leonard, what happened in there? Someone recorded it. I didn't know until just now. Leonard froze his brow. Recorded phone camera. Kid in the corner. He caught the whole thing, me walking in the exchange the moment they finally cashed your check. It's online already. I saw it while we were walking out. Leonard's first instinct is discomfort. He frowns. I didn't ask for that. I know, Grady says, but it's already picking up traction. It's got over 10,000 views and people are talking. Leonard exhales deep and slow. Not sure I want to be seen like that. Grady shakes his head. You were seen the way you should have been all along. That moment, it hit people. It reminded them. Leonard doesn't answer right away. The memory of the teller's expression, the manager's downcast eyes, the woman stepping forward, those images replay more clearly than any video. Later that afternoon, Leonard returns home. He climbs the stairs to his apartment, slowly, the envelope of bills tucked neatly in his coat. He doesn't turn on the TV. He doesn't check the internet. Instead, he heats up a can of soup, eats at the small kitchen table, and lets the radio murmur in the background. The world has spun faster than he expected today, and he needs it to slow down. The next morning, there's a message on his landline. Then another. By noon, 3 more. One is from a local news station asking for an interview. Another from a woman with the Pacific Western corporate office requesting a callback. And the third, a familiar voice. Leonard, it's Thomas. Call me when you get a chance. You've got more people wanting to talk to you than I think you know what to do with. Leonard listens to each message, then sits back in his chair. He looks around his modest apartment. Photos of his daughter, a small shelf of paperback novels, a jar of spare coins. He picks up the envelope from the bank, still unopened, and holds it between his hands. He's never asked to be a symbol, never wanted to be a headline, but something inside him shifts. Not pride, not ambition, just a sense of obligation. He calls back the woman from corporate first. Mr. Brooks, she says quickly, her voice filled with urgency and restraint. We deeply regret what happened at our J Street branch. Our regional director will be reaching out personally. We're also organizing a formal apology letter. Would you be willing to accept a call from our senior team? Leonard pauses. Ma'am, I'm not angry. She stammers, surprised. I appreciate that. Still, it doesn't excuse, I know, he says, gently, but I don't need anyone to panic over this. I just want folks to remember how to see people. She's quiet, caught off guard. Would you be open to attending a community meeting we're hosting? To speak briefly, we think it might help our staff hear directly from someone with your perspective. Leonard thinks about that for a long moment. Maybe. By the time the weekend rolls around, the video has reached over 200,000 views. It's been shared by a local veteran advocacy page and even picked up by a popular account that highlights acts of quiet justice. The caption reads, "He just wanted to cash a check." They gave him a reason to remember his worth. On Sunday, Leonard walks into his regular diner, the one with the vinyl booths and scratchy speakers playing old blues. He's greeted the same way as always by the waitress, who knows he takes his coffee black. But something is different. At the booth next to his, a man leans over and says, "You're the guy, aren't you, from that video? The bank." Leonard glances up uneasy. "I suppose so," the chummy smiles. "Respect, sir. Not many people would have handled it with that kind of calm." Leonard offers a faint nod. "Didn't see the point in yelling. Didn't need to," the man says. "That other guy, your friend, he said everything that needed saying. He wasn't supposed to be there," Leonard replies, voice low. "Maybe he was," the man says before turning back to his meal. Leonard sits with that thought. Across the city at the Pacific Western corporate office, emails continue to fly. Sensitivity training is expedited. Branch managers are briefed. Regional Director Amelia Graves insists on sending a handwritten letter herself. In a meeting with her executive team, she says plainly, "It's not about damage control, it's about dignity." By Monday afternoon, the letter arrives at Leonard's door. He opens it, reads it twice, then sets it beside the check stub from earlier that week. Not because he needs it, but because it's the first time anyone's ever written him something like that in years. He doesn't feel like a hero. He doesn't feel like a martyr. He feels like a man who's been noticed finally. But not everything stays buried forever. By Thursday, Leonard is still unsure about going. The flyer Major Grady gave him sits on the corner of his kitchen counter, half buried under an old grocery list. It's printed in bold serif font, Veterans Roundtable Real Stories. Real brotherhood. The idea of sitting in a room full of strangers, let alone speaking, makes him anxious. His whole life has been about doing the work quietly. No speeches, no awards, no fuss. Just keep your head down, fix what's broken, and move on. He makes a sandwich, then lets it sit untouched. He walks out onto the balcony, listens to the traffic a few floors below, watches a bird land on the rusted railing, and hop away. At some point, he pulls the flyer closer. He reads the words again. Real stories. His story has been real. It's just never been told out loud. By early evening, he's standing outside the Elk Grove Community Center. The brick building is low and simple with a flagpole out front and cracked pavement in the lot. He's early as usual. A couple of volunteers are setting up chairs inside the main hall. There's no stage, just a semicircle of seats and a folding table with bottled water. No cameras, no microphones, just people. Major Grady spots him first. "I didn't think you'd come," he says, smiling. Leonard shrugs, adjusting his cap. "Didn't think I would either." They sit side by side as the room slowly fills. Older men and women in denim jackets and faded ball caps, a few younger vets from more recent wars, and a small handful of high school students who look slightly out of place but genuinely interested. Everyone takes a seat, casual, informal. When it starts, there's no big introduction. Just a volunteer facilitator standing at the front, thanking everyone for being there. And then after a few brief comments, she turns to Leonard. "We were wondering if Mr. Brooks might be willing to share what happened at the bank this week, if you're comfortable." Leonard stands slowly, cane in hand, and walks to the front. He doesn't look out at the crowd right away. He stares at the floor for a moment, then up toward the faded stars and stripes hanging from the far wall. "I'm not a speaker," he says, voice soft but steady. "I'm a mechanic." Was anyway. Fixed trucks, engines, radios, things that didn't work right. A few people nod, murmuring. "I've never cared much for attention," he continues, "but the other day I walked into a bank. Had a check from my daughter, been going to that branch for 30-something years. But because my ID was expired, they treated me like I didn't matter. The room quiets, no coughs, no movement. Just listening. I showed them my VA card, my name on the check. Everything. Didn't yell, didn't threaten. Just asked." He glances at Grady for a second. Then this guy walks in, someone I hadn't seen in decades. And he says, "You're turning away the man who kept my convoy alive." There's a beat of silence. Then Leonard continues. "They cashed the check. Sure, but that's not the point. The point is, if he hadn't walked in, nothing would have changed. I'd have left, hungry, invisible." A young man near the back, maybe 17 shifts forward. Leonard notices. "I guess what I'm trying to say," Leonard says slowly, "is that people shouldn't need a witness to be treated with dignity. Respect isn't a bonus. It's supposed to be the baseline." No one speaks for a moment. Then someone says, "Amen," softly. Leonard sits down again, but the mood in the room has changed. The students lean in a little closer. One of the older vets, a woman in her 60s, raises her hand and shares her own story of being dismissed by a hospital receptionist. Another man talks about being ignored at a job fair. Each story isn't exactly the same, but the thread between them is. Afterward, people gather around Leonard not to fawn, but to connect. A retired Marine asks about the convoy he mentioned. A teen with a notepad asks if he can write a school essay about him, and Leonard blushes and waves it off. "I just fixed things," he says again. Grady grins. That's the part they'll remember. By the end of the night, Leonard has a new flyer in his pocket, next month's meeting. He promises to think about attending again. On the way out, the same high schooler who asked to write about him walks beside him. "I think people just need someone to go first," the boy says. Then they feel like they can speak too. Leonard nods. Maybe. Or maybe they just need someone to remind them they're not alone. They walk out into the cool evening air. The parking lot is quiet now. Grady catches up and claps a hand on Leonard's shoulder. "You spoke well," he says. Leonard chuckles. "Didn't say much. You didn't have to. You said what mattered. But not everything stays buried forever." 3 weeks pass. Leonard doesn't go viral again, but he does get noticed. At the grocery store, a middle-aged man in a delivery uniform shakes his hand quietly by the canned goods aisle. "Saw the clip," he says. "Thank you for not backing down." At the post office, the clerk calls him by name for the first time in years. And at the bus stop, an older woman with a cane of her own offers him the bench and says, "You remind me of my brother. He passed last year, but he had your same look." like someone who's seen too much but never says so. Leonard doesn't seek these moments out. He doesn't post or comment or even scroll much, but he carries them, each nod, each glance, each moment of soft recognition. It's as if the world has slowly started remembering how to look not through him, but at him. And it's not just about him either. It's about all the people who sit silently at the edges of rooms, who do the hard work and never ask for credit, who limp quietly and carry history in their bones. The flyer for the next Veterans Roundtable sits on his table again. But this time it isn't buried under unopened mail. It's tacked to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a wrench, his daughter's gift from years ago. The magnet has chipped the paper, curling slightly at the corners. Still, it's there. That Thursday, he returns to the community center. More chairs this time, a few new faces, some of the same high schoolers, and a woman from a nearby university with a notebook and an intent gaze. Leonard speaks again, this time not because he's asked, but because he's ready. He talks about what it was like returning home in the 70s, about being told no one cares about Vietnam anymore, about the first job he applied for where the interviewer said, "You're too old to keep up," and about the quiet that followed for decades, the kind that settles into your chest until you stop expecting to be seen at all. But something happened, Leonard says, in that bank. Not just because Thomas walked in, but because the silence broke. And once it breaks, you can't go back to pretending it was never there. Later that week, a senator's office reaches out. Someone recorded Leonard's talk, and it's now being used in a state-level training for public-facing government staff. The clip is short, just Leonard at the front of the room in jeans and that same old 1st Cavalry cap saying respect isn't earned by medals or degrees. It's earned by showing up and by remembering that no one stands taller by making someone else feel small. The clip isn't flashy, it doesn't trend, but it sticks. It's used in workshops, in HR trainings, in classrooms. One quiet voice still echoing. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Major Grady shows up at Leonard's door holding 2 cups of coffee. "You're becoming a regular speaker," he says with a grin. Leonard chuckles. "You say that like it's a good thing." Grady settles into the creaky balcony chair beside him. "Because it is. People need your voice, not to be inspired, just to remember what real looks like." They sit for a while sipping coffee, the city humming below. Leonard watches the same cracked sidewalk where he used to walk unnoticed. He sees it now for what it always was, not just a path, but a pattern. A way the world learned to overlook and maybe now is learning to unlearn. "You think any of this changes anything?" Leonard asks, not bitter, just thoughtful. Grady turns to him. "It already has. You just can't always see the ripple when you're standing in the middle of the pond." Leonard leans back, closing his eyes briefly. That night, he receives a handwritten note from a young man in that first roundtable group. The boy writes, "You made me realize that quiet people are still full of stories. I want to be someone who listens better." Leonard sets the note on his nightstand beside his father's old pocket watch and the VA card that started everything. He doesn't need more proof than that. The sky softens as the sun sinks behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across Leonard's living room floor. The radio hums quietly in the background, just static and old jazz. He doesn't feel famous. He doesn't feel like a symbol. He feels like himself, a man who once fixed broken machines, a man who walked into a bank and left with something more than money, a man who for the first time in a long time no longer has to explain his worth. And as the lights blink on across the neighborhood, and the night breeze filters through the open window, Leonard Brooks rests easy, not because the world has changed completely, but because now at least it's listening. Because some stories don't need shouting. They just need space. Some dignity doesn't come in uniforms. It comes in stillness. And some legacies are built not on medals or praise, but in the quiet, sacred moments where someone finally says, "I see you."